Doctor leaves patient in coma alone for 1 hour and can't believe what he sees. Julian Sterling didn't even look back when he left the room. He had more important things waiting, and that old man in the bed wasn't going anywhere anyway. The monitors beeped in the steady rhythm he already knew by heart, and the nursing staff could handle any emergency. An hour away wouldn't make a difference. It was when he opened the door to room 304 that his body completely froze. There, on the hospital bed where only his critically ill patient should have been, were 7 cats. 7 orange, grey and tabby cats, all curled up around the unconscious man, purring in a surreal chorus that echoed through the sterile room. "What the—" Julian's voice faltered. His hands trembled as he gripped the doorknob. This couldn't be happening. Mercy Heights Medical Center had strict hygiene protocols. No animal could have gotten in there. None. And yet there they were. 7 stray-looking felines, some with torn ears, others with visible scars, all resting on the fragile body of Mr. Arthur as if they were guardians of a treasure. The doctor stepped into the room, and the scene became even more absurd under the fluorescent light. The cats weren't startled by his presence. On the contrary, one of them, a large tabby with a white spot on its chest, lifted its head and stared at him with those piercing yellow eyes, as if judging him. "Surprised, Dr. Sterling?" The voice came from the door. Julian spun around so fast he nearly lost his balance. There stood Eleanor Vance, the head nurse, that woman in her late 50s who was always on his case, questioning his decisions, making him feel like every choice needed a justification. She wore her usual immaculate uniform, but there was something different in her eyes, a determination he had never seen before. "How did these animals get in here?" he exploded, pointing at the cats. "Do you know the contamination risk? The sanitation rules? I'm calling administration right now, and I brought them," Eleanor interrupted, crossing her arms. The silence that followed was as thick as concrete. Julian blinked, processing those words. A head nurse with decades of experience, admitting to violating all the hospital's biosafety rules. "Are you insane?" He walked toward her, his voice rising. "I'm reporting you right now. You'll lose your license, your job, everything you've built. How could you? And are you going to explain where you were for the past hour?" Eleanor didn't back down an inch. "Because I have hallway camera footage showing you leaving the hospital during your shift, with a critically ill patient under your responsibility." Julian's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. "How did she? When did she?" Eleanor pulled her phone from her pocket and turned the screen toward him. There, in clear video, was Julian leaving through the hospital's side door at 2:47 p.m., looking around before heading to the parking lot. The footage clearly showed his lab coat, his ID badge, his guilty expression. "Was that meeting with the real estate agent really that important?" Eleanor asked, her voice calm but with a steely edge beneath. "Couldn't that apartment on 5th Avenue wait until the end of your shift?" Julian felt the blood drain from his face. How did she know about the apartment? How did she know about any of this? "That's blackmail," he whispered. "That's a stalemate," she corrected. "You can report me for the cats. I can report you for patient abandonment. We both lose. Or," she paused, looking at Mr. Arthur and the animals around him, "we can talk like adults about what's happening here." One of the smaller cats, with completely black fur, stretched and settled its head on Mr. Arthur's arm. The collective purring seemed to fill every empty space in the room, a primitive and comforting sound that clashed brutally with the electronic beeps of the medical equipment. Julian ran his hand over his face. His shift, which was already terrible, had just turned into a nightmare. And the worst part was that Eleanor was right. They were even, both with cards that could destroy each other's careers. "Explain," he said, defeated. "Explain why the hell you brought 7 cats into my hospital." "It's not your hospital," Eleanor retorted. "And they're not just 7 cats. They're the 7 cats Mr. Arthur fed, cared for, and saved over the last 5 years. Every single one of them." She stepped into the room and approached the bed. One of the cats, a big orange one, rubbed against her hand. Eleanor stroked it with a gentleness that surprised Julian. "This one here is Cheddar. He was the first one Mr. Arthur rescued from a cardboard box in the rain. This little black one is Casper. His paw was broken when he found him. That grey one over there lying on his chest is Tiara. She had been beaten and left for dead. Each one has a story. Each one owes its life to this man who's here, unconscious, with no one. He has someone, Julian argued, checking the chart at the foot of the bed. He has a daughter, Sarah Harrison. She was notified when he was admitted. She was notified 3 days ago, Eleanor said bitterly. And she still hasn't shown up, hasn't called, hasn't sent a message. This man is here between life and something else, and the only family that cares has 4 paws and purrs. Julian looked at Mr. Arthur again. The man was in his late 70s with thin white hair and a gaunt, time-worn face. His skin was pale, his lips dry, his body still except for the slight rise and fall of his chest. He had been like this since he was admitted after being found collapsed on the street, a victim of a severe cardiac episode that left him in this limbo state. That still doesn't justify bringing animals into a hospital environment, Julian insisted, but his voice sounded weak even to himself. The rules exist for a reason. The rules, Eleanor repeated, as if the word had a bitter taste. Do you know what rules are, Dr. Sterling? They're lines we draw to make ourselves feel safe, to convince ourselves we have control over things we don't control. Life, suffering, the passage of time. But sometimes rules are good for nothing except making us forget why we're here. Cheap philosophy won't change the fact that... Look at the monitors, she interrupted. Julian blinked, confused. Then his eyes turned to the screens showing Mr. Arthur's vital signs. Heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation. Everything was stable. Better than stable. The numbers were within parameters he hadn't seen in days for this patient. Coincidence, he muttered. Is it? Eleanor asked. Because when I brought the cats in 40 minutes ago, his heart rate was at 52 beats per minute. Now it's 64. His blood pressure went from 90/60 to 105/70. The saturation, which was fluctuating around 91%, is steady at 96%. Julian approached the monitors, disbelief and something like fear mingling in his chest. He checked the records from the last few hours in the digital system. Eleanor was right. Mathematically, objectively right. Mr. Arthur's vital signs had significantly improved since the cats showed up. This doesn't make any sense, he said, more to himself than to her. It does, a female voice sounded from the door. They both turned. A woman in her mid-40s stood there, with an expensive bag over her shoulder, elegant clothes and flawless hair. But her eyes were red, swollen, as if she'd been crying recently or hadn't slept in days. "Who are you?" Julian asked. "Sarah Harrison," she replied, her voice hoarse. "The daughter who didn't call. The daughter who didn't come. The daughter who—" She stopped, swallowing hard, her eyes fixed on the cats around her father. "What is this?" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, continuing, Sarah entered the room as if walking on broken glass. Each step was hesitant, calculated, her eyes unable to decide whether to look at her unconscious father or at the 7 felines surrounding him like unlikely guardians. "Who let these animals in here?" She turned to Julian, her voice rising an octave. "Are you crazy? My father is in critical condition, and you bring strays?" "Your strays," Eleanor said, each word weighing a ton, "are the only ones who cared enough to come." The silence that followed was cutting. Sarah opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Her hands gripped her purse strap until her knuckles turned white. "How dare you?" she whispered. "You don't know anything about me. Nothing about my relationship with my father. Nothing about—" "I know he's been here for 3 days, and you haven't come," Eleanor said firmly. "I know when the hospital called, you said you were in an important meeting and would call back. I know you didn't call. I know—" "Enough!" Sarah shouted, and for a moment everyone froze. The cats shifted restlessly. The big tabby stood up, arched its back, fur bristling. Cheddar mewed softly, a sound that seemed almost a warning. Julian noticed the animals were protecting Mr. Arthur from the tension, the conflict, the pain filling that space. "I'm so sorry," Sarah said, her voice breaking. I didn't know it would be like this. When they said he had a heart problem, I thought it would be like the other times, that he'd be hospitalized for a few days and come home complaining about the hospital food. I didn't—" Tears began to roll down her face. "I didn't know it would be this serious." Julian watched the woman crumble, literally. Sarah staggered to the chair by the bed and sank into it, sobbing with her hands covering her face. And despite all her arrogance, all her coldness cultivated over years of medical residency and dehumanizing shifts, something inside him stirred. "Your father is stable," he said, his voice softer. "The episode was serious, yes, an acute myocardial infarction with significant damage, but he's fighting." Sarah lifted her face. Her eyes met his, and Julian saw a mix of desperate hope and overwhelming guilt there. "Will he—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I don't know," Julian admitted, and that honesty hurt coming out of his mouth. "No one knows. It depends on him, on how much he wants to come back." "He won't want to," Sarah whispered. "Not after everything I said. The things I said the last time we saw each other." Eleanor approached and placed a hand on the younger woman's shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but filled with a compassion that made Julian feel small and inadequate. "Tell me," Eleanor said softly. "Sometimes talking helps." Sarah wiped her face with the back of her hand, leaving mascara smudges. She looked at her father, at the cats, at her own hands. "We fought," she began, her voice trembling. "We fought badly 6 months ago. I found out he was spending almost his entire pension on these animals, on food, vet bills, medicine. He was counting pennies by the end of the month, but he always had money for the cats." "And you were angry," Julian said, not as a question, but as a statement. "I was furious," Sarah agreed. "I screamed at him. She said it was selfishness, that he needed to think about his future, that he couldn't spend everything on animals when he should be taking care of his own health. She said that—" Her voice faltered. "She said my mother would be disappointed in what he had become." Cheddar lifted his head and looked directly at Sarah. It was such an intense look, so conscious, that she shuddered. "Did he say anything?" Eleanor asked. "He said the cats were the only thing that gave him a reason to wake up in the morning," Sarah replied. "He said that after my mother was gone, they were the only ones who needed him. That when he looked at me, he saw disappointment, but when he looked at them, he saw gratitude." I stormed out, slamming the door. That was the last time I spoke to him. The monitor beeped louder. Everyone looked. Mr. Arthur's heart rate had risen to 72. Julian checked the numbers again, his medical mind trying to find a logical, scientific, provable explanation. But there was none. "They're responding to her," Eleanor murmured. "The cats, they know she's the daughter." "That's ridiculous," Julian said, but his voice lacked conviction. Sarah stood up slowly and approached the bed. One of the smaller cats, a blue-grey female that Julian hadn't really noticed before, got up and came toward her. The cat rubbed against Sarah's hand, purring loudly. "She never does that," Sarah whispered, amazed. "Tiara never lets anyone touch her. Not even my dad could pick her up. She was too wild." "How do you know her name?" Julian asked. "My dad sent messages," Sarah admitted, stroking the cat with trembling fingers. "Pictures of the cats, telling me about each rescue. I never replied. I thought it was a waste of time. Old man nonsense. But I read them. I saw every picture." Tiara climbed onto Sarah's lap, something that clearly surprised even Eleanor. The cat curled up there, purring so loudly it vibrated, and Sarah held her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "He told me about her," Sarah continued, the words coming out between tears. "He said she had been beaten, that he found her in an alley, barely alive. He took her to a vet who charged a fortune to save her. He paid in installments for months. Tiara had been afraid of humans ever since, but he had patience. He left food, water, never forced it, until one day she let him touch her. And he cried, my dad cried, telling me that in a message." "Why didn't you reply?" Eleanor asked, without judgment, just genuine curiosity. Because I was angry, Sarah admitted. Because he chose these animals over me. Over fixing our relationship. Over being the father I needed after we lost my mother. Maybe he didn't know how, a new voice said. Everyone turned to the door. A man in his early 30s stood there wearing a white coat, a badge identifying him as an internal medicine resident. But what caught Julian's attention was his gaze fixed on one of the cats, the big tabby. "Who are you?" Julian asked, authority returning to his voice. "Caleb Foster," the resident replied. "Second year." He hesitated, stepping slowly into the room. "I know that cat. The tabby. His name is Zeus." "How do you know Zeus?" Eleanor asked, surprised. Caleb approached the bed. Zeus lifted his head and something incredible happened. The cat meowed, a loud, urgent sound, and jumped off the bed straight into the resident's arms. Caleb caught him, and the cat began rubbing against his face, purring desperately. "Because when I was 8 years old," Caleb said, his voice choked, "that cat saved me." The silence in the room was so deep that Zeus's purring echoed like an engine. Julian looked from the resident to the cat, from the cat to Mr. Arthur, trying to piece together a puzzle that made no sense. "Explain," Julian demanded. Caleb held Zeus against his chest, his eyes distant as if traveling through time. "I was a troubled kid," he began. "My parents had a messy divorce. My mother worked 3 shifts to pay the bills. I was alone a lot. One day I decided to run away from home. It was raining, I was cold, hungry, scared. I hid in a park, under a slide." He paused, stroking Zeus. That's when he showed up. He was still a kitten, but he already had that white spot on his chest. He came meowing, rubbing against me, as if he knew I needed someone. And then a man arrived. An older man, with a bag full of cat food and cans. He saw us and sat down next to me. "My father," Sarah whispered. "He didn't judge me," Caleb continued. "He didn't tell me I was wrong, didn't lecture me. He just sat down, opened a can of tuna, and shared it with me and the cat. We stayed there in the rain, eating tuna and talking. He told me about how he had lost someone important and how the cats helped him want to live again. And he told me that running away doesn't solve anything, but sometimes you need a friend who doesn't talk much, just sticks around." Julian felt something tighten in his chest. That story, that moment of human connection, seemed so far from his own life. When was the last time he truly connected with someone? When did he stop seeing patients as cases and start seeing them as people? "He took me back home," Caleb said. "He talked to my mother. He visited us a few times after that, always bringing Zeus. The cat kind of became my therapist. I'd go to the park to feed him, talk to him. It helped me get through that tough time. When I started medical school, I tried to find the man from the park to thank him, but he had moved. I never knew his name. I never got to say thank you." "And now you can," Eleanor said softly. Caleb looked at Mr. Arthur lying in bed, surrounded by the cats he had saved, and the tears finally streamed down his face. "Mr. Arthur," he said, approaching the bed, "I became a doctor because of you. Because that day when I was just a scared kid, you showed me that kindness matters, that sometimes saving a life doesn't require medicine or surgery. It just takes being there." Zeus jumped from his arms back onto the bed, settling next to the unconscious man. The cat began licking Mr. Arthur's face with a tenderness that broke your heart. Sarah sobbed loudly, Tiara still in her lap. Eleanor had tears in her eyes. And Julian found himself having to turn away because something inside him was breaking, shattering, rebuilding. "I need to check something," he said abruptly, leaving the room. No one followed him. Julian went straight to the nurse's station, opened the system, and started pulling up Mr. Arthur's records. Not just the recent ones, but everything the hospital had on him. And the more he read, the more a story unfolded. Arthur Harrison, 73 years old, widowed for 8 years, previous profession, veterinarian, license suspended 7 years ago for... Julian stopped, rereading that part. License suspended due to an animal cruelty complaint filed by a competing clinic. Case later dismissed for lack of evidence, but the license was never reinstated. He kept digging. He found an old article from a local newspaper. Veterinarian fights to reopen clinic after false accusation. The photo showed a younger Mr. Arthur, but with the same gentle eyes, holding a rescued cat. "Find something interesting, Dr. Sterling?" Julian turned around. Eleanor was there, arms crossed, with that look of someone who knows more than she lets on. "He was a veterinarian," Julian said. "He lost everything over a false accusation." "Not just that." Eleanor pulled up a chair and sat down. "Arthur Harrison was one of the most respected veterinarians in the region. He had a large clinic, employees, and organized life. Until he started reporting cases of animal abuse he witnessed. Animals that arrived injured, owners who clearly mistreated them. He went further than he should have. Documented everything, filed reports, pressured the authorities. And someone didn't like that," Julian finished. "The Miller Veterinary Group," Eleanor said. "One of the biggest in the city. They catered to the upper class, charged fortunes, and had schemes to falsify pedigrees and engage in irresponsible breeding. Arthur found out and reported them. The retaliation came in the form of a lawsuit. They paid witnesses to claim he mistreated animals in his own clinic, planted evidence. In the end, even after proving his innocence, his reputation was destroyed. He lost clients, had to close the clinic, and the board suspended his license as a precaution. He never managed to reverse it." Julian sat down heavily. The story was more complex, sadder than he had imagined. "How do you know all this?" he asked. "Because I knew his wife," Eleanor replied. "Martha, she was a nurse here before she got sick. I saw what that did to both of them. I saw Arthur struggling to pay for her treatment bills after losing everything. I saw him blaming himself, thinking the stress of the situation had contributed to her illness. And I saw him shut down after she was gone. That's when the cats appeared. Or rather, when he started seeking them out." "Why?" Julian wanted to know. "Why the cats?" "Because they don't judge," a voice answered. Sarah was at the door, Tiara still in her arms. She had a different look now, as if she had seen something that fundamentally changed her. "My father told me that once," Sarah continued, walking in and sitting down next to Eleanor. "He said humans complicate everything, that we expect, judge, demand. But cats, they just need food, affection, a safe place. In return, they give absolute loyalty. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, successful or a failure. If you take care of them, they love you unconditionally." He was searching for what he had lost, Julian murmured. "Purpose. Redemption." "He was saving himself," Eleanor corrected. "By saving the cats, he saved a piece of his own soul. Each rescued animal was proof that there was still goodness in him, that it was still worth trying." A noise from room 304 made them jump to their feet. They ran back and found Caleb standing by the bed, eyes wide at the monitors. "The heart rate," he said, pointing. "It's at 78. And look at the oxygen level, 98%. Julian approached, incredulous. All the numbers were better, significantly better. And at the center of it all, Mr. Arthur remained surrounded by his 7 cats, each purring in harmony, as if performing some ancient healing ritual. "This isn't possible," Julian insisted, but his voice sounded hollow. "There's no scientific basis for—" "There is," Caleb interrupted. "Studies on animal-assisted therapy. Cats' purring operates at a frequency that's proven to help bone healing, reduce stress, lower blood pressure. It's science, just science that we ignore because it doesn't fit our rigid protocols." Julian wanted to argue, but the evidence was right there on the monitors in the numbers that didn't lie. Something was happening, something he couldn't explain, but couldn't deny. "The administration," he said suddenly. "If anyone finds out, they'll remove the cats from here. They'll fire you, Eleanor. They'll make a scandal out of it." "Then don't let anyone find out," Sarah spoke, her voice firm. "At least not yet. Give my father time. Give the cats time. Give us time to understand what's happening here." Julian looked at each of them. Eleanor with her unwavering determination. Sarah with her guilt turning into love. Caleb with his gratitude finally expressed. And Mr. Arthur, surrounded by 7 tiny miracles of fur and purrs. "You're asking me to break every rule," he said. "We're asking you to remember why you became a doctor, Eleanor replied. To heal. And sometimes healing means setting aside protocols and trusting the impossible. Julian closed his eyes. He thought about his career, his reputation, everything he had built as the doctor who followed all the rules, who never questioned, who never took risks. He thought about the apartment he wanted to buy, the comfortable life he planned to have. And then he thought about Mr. Arthur, a man who had lost everything doing the right thing, and who now fought for his life with only 7 cats by his side. "All right," he said, opening his eyes. "But if anyone asks, I don't know a thing. And you all owe me a much better explanation than that story about healing purrs." Sarah smiled for the first time, a small but genuine smile. Eleanor nodded respectfully. Caleb just held on to Zeus's paw, who had returned to his side. "We need a plan," Julian continued, his medical mind already working. "The cats can't stay here indefinitely. Someone will notice. And when that happens, we need a story. A good story." "Leave it to me," Eleanor said. "I know people who can help, but for now let's just observe. See what happens." What happened in the following hours was something Julian would never forget. As the afternoon turned into evening, Mr. Arthur's vital signs kept improving steadily. Not dramatic enough to seem miraculous, but consistent enough to be impossible to ignore. And the cats acted as if they were performing a job. They took turns in positions on and around Mr. Arthur's body. First Cheddar would lie on his chest, then it was Casper's turn to settle by his head. Tiara preferred to stay at his feet, Zeus took the post near his heart, and so on, in a rotation that seemed orchestrated by some collective intelligence. Sarah never left the room. She sat in the chair by the bed and started talking to her unconscious father, telling him about her life, her work, the things she had never shared when he was awake to listen. "I became an architect, Dad," she said, holding his free hand, the one without a cat lying on it. "Remember when I was little and spent hours drawing houses? You said I'd be a great architect. And you know what? You were right. I designed 3 buildings on the Upper East Side. One of them won an award. I wanted to tell you, but I thought you only cared about the cats." Tiara lifted her head and meowed softly, as if telling Sarah to keep going. "I know now, that wasn't true," Sarah continued, tears rolling silently. "You cared about me. You just didn't know how to show it after Mum was gone. You two were so close, so connected. When she passed, it was like a part of you went too. And I was so caught up in my own grief that I didn't see yours." Julian watched everything from afar, leaning against the wall. Eleanor had gone to get water and some things to spend the night there. Caleb had to finish his shift, but promised to return in the morning. And Julian found he couldn't leave that room. Something held him there, a need to witness whatever was happening. His phone rang. It was the real estate agent, asking if he was still interested in the apartment. Julian looked at the screen, at the message that represented everything he thought was important: financial success, status, material comfort. And then he looked at Mr. Arthur, at the cats, at Sarah crying and talking to a father who might not be able to hear her. He hung up the phone without answering. "Dr. Sterling," Sarah called out, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," he said, stepping closer. "Why did you become a doctor?" she wanted to know. "It's not a judgment. It's genuine curiosity." Julian blinked, surprised by the question. When was the last time someone had asked him that? When was the last time he had even asked himself? "My mother," he replied, the words escaping before he could stop them. "She got sick when I was 15. Cancer. The doctors were distant, cold. They treated her like a bundle of defective cells that needed to be removed, not like a person. She suffered a lot. And when there was nothing left to do, they just sent us home, as if they'd done their job." Sarah was watching him with complete attention. Even the cats seemed to have stopped purring to listen. "I swore it would be different," Julian continued, "that when I became a doctor, I would treat people like people, with compassion, with humanity, with time." "So what happened?" Sarah asked softly. The question cut deep because Julian knew the answer. He knew exactly what had happened. The endless residency, the inhumane shifts, the pressure to be efficient, fast, productive. The superiors who said compassion didn't fill beds. The administration that demanded numbers, not quality of care. And little by little, without realizing it, he had become exactly the kind of doctor he hated. "I lost myself," he admitted, and it was the most honest thing to come out of his mouth in years. "I lost myself somewhere between wanting to help and just surviving the system. And now I look in the mirror and I don't recognize who I am anymore." Sarah stood up and, to his surprise, hugged him. It was brief, simple, but full of understanding. "Maybe we can all find each other again," she said. "Me, you, my dad, all of us. Maybe that's what these moments are for, to remind us of who we want to be." Julian had no words. He just nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. Eleanor came back carrying bags with food, water, and what looked like blankets. "Planning to camp out?" Julian tried to joke. "Planning to spend the night," she corrected. "I'm not leaving Mr. Arthur alone, or the cats, or Sarah." "I'm staying too," Sarah said, if that's allowed." "He's your father," Eleanor replied. "Of course it's allowed." "And Julian began, surprised by his own words. "I need to get back early tomorrow for my shift, but I'll follow the case. Personally, I'll be here." Eleanor smiled, and it was a smile that said she might have seen this coming all along, that this whole situation, as absurd as it was, had a greater purpose. "Just one more thing," Julian said before leaving. "How did you manage to bring 7 cats into a hospital without anyone seeing?" Eleanor exchanged a knowing look with Sarah. "The hospital has 13 floors," she said, "and a service stairwell nobody has used since they installed the new elevators. Plus, at 2 in the afternoon, most of the staff is in the cafeteria or doing rounds. It wasn't as hard as it seems." "You planned this," Julian realized. "We planned it," Eleanor admitted. "Because we knew it was the right thing to do. Rules exist to guide us, Dr. Sterling, but sometimes when rules conflict with humanity, you have to choose humanity." Julian stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something he never thought he would. He bowed his head in a slight nod of respect. "Good night," he said. "Any changes? Call me immediately." "Will do," Eleanor promised. As Julian left the hospital that night, the world felt different. The city lights flickered as always, traffic flowed chaotically through the streets, people hurried along to their destinations, everything the same, everything normal. But something inside him had fundamentally changed. He drove home on autopilot, but instead of thinking about the apartment he wanted to buy, he thought about the cats purring. Instead of planning his next professional conquest, he thought about Sarah talking to her unconscious father. Instead of calculating his next career move, he thought about Caleb saying he had become a doctor because of a kindness he received as a child. At home, Julian couldn't sleep. He stayed on the couch, scrolling through medical articles on animal-assisted therapy. Studies showed that the presence of pets reduced cortisol levels, the stress hormone, that the purring of cats operated between 25 and 50 hertz, a frequency proven beneficial for bone density and healing, that patients with pets recovered faster from heart surgeries. There was science, there was data, there was evidence. But this wasn't taught in medical school. It wasn't part of the protocols. It didn't fit into the neat boxes of modern medicine. At 5 in the morning, the phone rang. Julian answered with his heart pounding. "Dr. Sterling," it was Eleanor. "You need to come now." "What happened? Mr. Arthur, just come." "Quickly." The call ended. Julian dressed in record time and rushed out to the car. He drove above the speed limit, his heart hammering, 1,000 possibilities racing through his mind. Sudden worsening, cardiac arrest, the cats had caused some infection, he had failed. He entered the hospital like a hurricane, took the stairs 2 at a time, reached room 304 out of breath, and stopped. Sarah was standing beside the bed, her hands covering her mouth, tears streaming freely. Eleanor was smiling, her eyes red but bright. Caleb had come back and was holding Zeus, both staring fixedly at the bed. And there in the center of it all, surrounded by his 7 cats, purring as always, Mr. Arthur had his eyes open. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Dad, Sarah whispered, approaching slowly as if afraid it was an illusion that would shatter at the slightest movement. Mr. Arthur's eyes moved, slowly with effort, but they moved. They found Sarah, and something passed through that gaze. Recognition, confusion, and then tears. Julian approached, the doctor in him automatically taking over. He checked the monitors. Everything was within the expected parameters for someone who had just emerged from a critical state. He grabbed a penlight and tested the pupils. Reactive. Tested basic reflexes. Present. Mr. Arthur, he said gently, can you hear me? If you can, blink once. The eyes blinked, once, clear and deliberate. Are you in pain anywhere? 2 blinks for yes, 1 for no, 1 blink. Do you recognize the people around you? 1 blink. Sarah let out a sob and carefully threw herself over her father, avoiding the cats and the equipment. Mr. Arthur couldn't hug her back, he was still too weak, but his head tilted slightly toward her, and that was enough. I'm sorry, Dad, Sarah cried. I'm sorry for everything, for not understanding, for being far away, for judging. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Cheddar got up and walked until he was between Sarah and Mr. Arthur, rubbing against both of them, as if uniting the two. Tiara meowed softly, and for a brief second, Mr. Arthur's lips curved into what could have been a smile. This is, Julian began, but he had no words. This shouldn't be possible. His condition was too severe. Recovery doesn't happen like this, so fast. But it happened, Eleanor said, coming to stand beside him. The numbers don't lie, Doctor. Sometimes medicine doesn't have all the answers. Sometimes there are things between heaven and earth that our protocols can't explain. There will be an explanation, Julian insisted, but his voice no longer held that absolute certainty. I'm going to order new tests. I'll document everything. There has to be a scientific explanation for... Sweetheart, Caleb said, still holding Zeus. The explanation is love. That man had 7 reasons to come back. 7 little beings who depend on him, who depend. And he had a daughter who deep down, even with all the hurt, still loved him. He felt that he came back because he had something to come back for. Julian wanted to argue. He wanted to say that love didn't heal heart attacks, that feelings didn't reverse cardiac damage, that there were biochemical and physiological processes that had to be respected. But when he looked at Mr. Arthur, at the purring cats, at Sarah holding her father's hand as if it were the most precious thing in the world, the words died in his throat. Because maybe Caleb was right. Maybe there were things science still couldn't measure, connections that didn't show up in blood tests, forces that didn't register on electrocardiograms. I'll notify the team, Julian said, leaving before anyone could see the tears threatening to fall. And I'll need help with explaining the cats when administration finds out. It's already handled, a voice said behind him in the hallway. Julian turned. A woman around 65 stood there, elegant even in simple clothes, grey hair pinned up in a bun, piercing blue eyes. She carried a folder of documents. Who are you? He asked. Diane Harrison, she replied, extending her hand. Arthur's cousin, and a lawyer. Retired, but still with the right contacts. Julian shook her hand, confused. A lawyer for what? To ensure those cats stay exactly where they are, Diane said with a smile that brooked no argument. I've already spoken with the board. I presented documentation on animal-assisted therapy, studies of similar cases, legal precedents. I also mentioned that any attempt to remove the animals would make perfect news for the local papers. Hospital blocks animals that saved elderly man. Imagine the headlines. Are you telling me you blackmailed the administration? Julian said, caught between horror and amazement. I'm telling you, I used my resources to protect my family, Diane corrected, and to ensure this hospital becomes a pioneer in something truly revolutionary. I've already talked to 3 media outlets. Reporters will want to do stories. This could put Mercy Heights Medical Center on the map. You'll be the first hospital in the region. maybe in the state, to officially implement an animal-assisted therapy program for critically ill patients. Julian blinked. Then he blinked again. You orchestrated all of this overnight? Sweetheart, Diane said, maternal. I didn't spend 40 years in law without learning a thing or two about getting things done. When Eleanor called me yesterday afternoon with the plan, I knew we'd need legal protection, so I worked all night, and now we have it. But the health risks, the protocols they're being reviewed, she interrupted. I hired a specialized consulting firm in hospital biosafety. They'll develop a specific protocol. The cats will undergo a complete veterinary evaluation, including all necessary tests. We'll have strict control over which animals can participate and under what conditions. Everything within regulations, everything documented, everything legal. Julian leaned against the wall, dizzy. That woman had effectively turned a blatant violation of hospital protocol into an opportunity for medical innovation. In one night. Why do all this? He asked. Your cousin is awake now. The hard part is over. Because this is bigger than Arthur, Diane replied, her face turning serious. My cousin lost everything doing the right thing. He lost his clinic, his reputation, his livelihood, all because he refused to stay silent in the face of injustice. And the world punished him for it. So if there's a chance, a single chance to turn that suffering into something good, something that can help other people, other animals, I'm going to make it happen. It's the least he deserves. Julian looked at that woman and saw in her the same determination he had seen in Eleanor, the same that he was beginning to feel in himself, a refusal to accept the status quo just because it had always been that way, a desire to do the right thing, even when the system said it was impossible. What do you need from me? He asked. Diane smiled. I need you to be the doctor that Arthur was as a veterinarian, someone who cares, who fights, who doesn't give up just because it's hard. Can you do that? Julian thought of his mother, of those cold doctors who treated her. He thought of the oath he took when he entered medicine. He thought of Mr. Arthur surrounded by cats he loved, waking up because he had love around him. I can, he said. I'll do it. Then we're going to need a press conference, Diane said, already reaching for her phone. I need to alert the reporters that we have an even better story. Patient wakes from critical condition with help from feline therapy. Mercy Heights Medical Center leads new approach in humane care. Dr. Julian Sterling, pioneer in integrative medicine. Wait, Julian raised his hands. I'm not a pioneer in anything. I was literally going to report the cats yesterday. But you didn't, Diane countered. You had the wisdom to stop, observe, and recognize something extraordinary when you saw it. That's exactly what we need in medicine. Open minds, open hearts. Before Julian could respond, a young nurse appeared running down the hallway. Dr. Sterling, the patient in 304 is awake and there are cats everywhere. Dr. Blackwood is having a fit. She wants to know what's going on and is threatening to call the board. Let me handle it, Diane said, already walking with determination. Where is this Dr. Blackwood? Julian almost felt sorry for Dr. Blackwood. Almost. The doctor was known for being even stricter than him when it came to protocols, but if anyone could deal with her, it was Diane. He returned to room 304. Mr. Arthur was still awake, his eyes more alert now. Sarah had pulled her chair close to the bed and was holding her father's hand, talking softly to him. Eleanor was checking the monitors with barely concealed satisfaction. Caleb had gone to get water, but would be back soon. How is he? Julian asked, slipping back into doctor mode. Weak but stable, Eleanor replied. He tried to speak twice, but still doesn't have the strength. But he's conscious, responsive, recognizes everyone. Julian approached the bed. The cats had repositioned themselves, giving space but staying close. It was as if they knew their work was done, but they didn't want to move away completely. Mr. Arthur, Julian said, I'm Dr. Julian Sterling. I'm taking care of you. You had a severe heart attack a few days ago, but you're improving. You'll need time to fully recover, but... He paused, choosing his words. Your friends here took very good care of you. Mr. Arthur's eyes moved to the cats. And then it happened. Tears began to roll down his wrinkled face, silent but deep. His mouth opened, trying to form words, but only a whisper came out. Sarah leaned in close. "Dad? Don't push it. You don't have to talk now." But Mr. Arthur was determined. His lips moved again, and this time a word came out, low, raspy, but clear. "Thank you." And in that moment, Julian understood. Thank you to the cats for staying. Thank you to Sarah for coming back. Thank you to Eleanor for risking her job. Thank you to life for giving him another chance. Thank you for not being alone. "You don't need to thank me," Sarah said, crying. "I'm the one who should be thanking you for never giving up, for showing me what true love is, even when I didn't want to see it, for saving these little four-pawed angels who saved you right back." Cheddar chose that moment to meow loudly, as if agreeing. Zeus stretched and yawned, showing all his teeth. Tiara purred louder, a sound that vibrated through the entire room. "I'm going to need to run some tests," Julian said, professional, "to better understand what happened neurologically. But for now, the most important thing is rest. And—" he looked at the cats. "Apparently, good company." A commotion outside the room caught everyone's attention. Raised voices. Diane saying something in a firm tone. Another voice, female and irritated, answering. The door opened, and Dr. Blackwood stormed in like a hurricane, Diane right behind. "This is outrageous," Dr. Blackwood practically shouted. "Animals in a hospital environment. This violates everything that—" She stopped upon seeing Mr. Arthur awake. "Wait, is he conscious?" "He is," Julian confirmed. "He regained consciousness during the early morning hours." Dr. Blackwood approached, her angry expression giving way to professional confusion. She checked the monitors, then looked at Mr. Arthur, then at the cats, then back at the monitors. "This doesn't make sense," she murmured. "His prognosis was guarded. The extent of the cardiac damage, he shouldn't be awake this soon. Not with this mental clarity." "And yet he is," Diane said, crossing her arms. "And if the doctor would take the trouble to read the documents I prepared, she'll see there's a plausible explanation, based on multiple studies on the beneficial effects of animal-assisted therapy in critical patients." "Assisted therapy requires preparation," Dr. Blackwood countered. "Certified animals, hygiene protocols, ethical approval. You can't just bring stray cats into—" "They're not strays," Sarah interrupted, standing up. "They have an owner, my father, and they have a vet, and vaccination records, and I have all the necessary documents to prove these animals are healthy and fit." "Do you?" Dr. Blackwood asked, skeptical. "I do," Sarah confirmed, picking up her phone. "My father was obsessive about documentation. Each cat has a complete file, vaccines, exams, treatments, all recorded in an app that syncs to the cloud. I can send it now if you want." Dr. Blackwood was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed, a deep exhaustion taking over her posture. "Even so," she began, but there was no longer any conviction in her voice. "Even so, this is irregular." "It was," Diane corrected. "Now it's a pilot project approved by the administration. I've already spoken with the general director. He's excited about the possibility of Mercy Heights Medical Center becoming a reference in patient care innovation. Of course, we'll need Dr. Blackwood's expertise to develop the proper protocols. After all, she's the infection control specialist, isn't she?" Julian almost laughed. Diane was brilliant. Instead of making Dr. Blackwood an enemy, she was recruiting her as an ally, offering her a central role in the project. Dr. Blackwood looked at Diane, then at Mr. Arthur, then at the cats. Julian could see the internal conflict in her. The part that wanted to follow the rules to the letter fighting against the part that recognized something genuinely extraordinary was happening. "Rigorous protocols," she finally said. "Complete veterinary evaluation of every animal, lab tests, health certification, controlled visitation schedule, continuous monitoring for infections, and at the first sign of any cross-contamination, the program is suspended. Those are my conditions." "Accepted," Diane said immediately. "Everything will be documented and supervised by qualified professionals. I already have a list of veterinarians interested in collaborating." So, Dr. Blackwood looked around as if she couldn't believe what she was about to say. Then let's do this right. Dr. Sterling, I need complete medical reports, thorough documentation of every change in vital signs correlated with the presence of the animals. This needs to be scientifically defensible. It will be, Julian promised, feeling an unprecedented excitement. I'll document everything, every detail. Dr. Blackwood nodded stiffly and left, still seeming unable to believe she had agreed to it. Diane smiled, victorious. And that's how it's done, she said. Turn an opponent into an ally. It works every time. You're terrifying, Julian admitted. I'm efficient, she corrected. Now, about the press conference. I was thinking tomorrow morning. That gives us time to organize everything, prepare the speeches, ensure that— No, Mr. Arthur said. Everyone froze. It was the first word from him that wasn't a weak whisper. Still hoarse, still difficult, but clear enough. Dad, Sarah held his hand. Don't talk. Save your strength. No, he repeated, more insistent this time. His eyes went to Diane. I don't want to be news. Diane moved closer to the bed, her face softening. Arthur, she said gently, I know you hate attention, but think about the good it could do. How many other animals could be helped? How many other patients could benefit? Mr. Arthur closed his eyes, clearly exhausted from the effort of speaking, but when he opened them again, there was a determination there that surprised everyone. My cats are private, he managed to say, not objects of curiosity. And Julian understood. Mr. Arthur had been exposed too much in the past. His good intentions had been twisted, used against him. He had learned the hard way that not all attention is good attention, and now, even if it could help others, he just wanted to protect his little companions from public scrutiny. All right, Diane said softly, clearly struggling against her lawyerly instincts. No press conference, at least not now. We can do it more discreetly. Academic articles, specialized publications. We keep you and the cats anonymous. Focus on the science, not the people. Can it be that way? Mr. Arthur thought for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. Better, he whispered. Then that's what we'll do, Diane agreed. I'll rethink the strategy. No unnecessary exposure. Just solid science and replicable results. Casper, the little black cat who had been quiet until then, got up and walked over to Mr. Arthur's face. The animal started purring loudly, rubbing against the man's cheek, and Mr. Arthur smiled, a small, tired but genuine smile. My boys, he murmured, the words almost lost in the purring. My girls, they took care of me. And we'll take care of them too, Sarah promised. All of them. I'll take them home, Dad. I'll give them a nice space with scratching posts with toys. I'll take care of them the way you did. You have allergies, Mr. Arthur reminded her, a note of humor in his weak voice. Sarah laughed through her tears. I'll take antihistamines, she said, every day if I have to. They saved you. It's the least I can do. Zeus meowed loudly, as if approving the plan. Caleb laughed, petting the cat. I think they liked the idea, he said. I want to help too, Caleb continued, looking at Mr. Arthur. When you get discharged, I want to keep following up. Not as a doctor, but as someone who owes you a lot, if you'll let me. Mr. Arthur looked at the young resident. Julian could see he didn't recognize Caleb. How could he? It had been over 20 years ago, and Caleb was just a scared child in the rain. But there was something in Mr. Arthur's eyes, a gentle wisdom that said he understood, that he knew he had touched lives along the way, even without knowing exactly which ones. Welcome, Mr. Arthur said simply. And so, in a hospital room that should have held only one patient and medical equipment, but now housed 7 cats, a family coming together, a brave nurse, a determined lawyer, a grateful young resident, and a doctor learning to be human again, something extraordinary was happening. Julian left to attend to other responsibilities, but promised to return. Throughout the day, an unusual procession passed through room 304. Cleaning staff who wanted to meet the famous cats, nurses from other floors curious about the story. Even patients from other rooms, those who could walk, showed up asking to see. And Julian realized something. People needed that. They needed a good story. Something to remind them that there was still kindness in the world, that small miracles were possible, that love, whether from people or cats, mattered. In the afternoon, when Julian returned to run new tests on Mr. Arthur, he found the room transformed. Sarah had brought more comfortable blankets. Eleanor had arranged bowls with fresh water for the cats. Diane had come back with decent food for humans and premium cat food for the felines, and Caleb was there, sitting in the corner, just watching and smiling. "How are you feeling?" Julian asked Mr. Arthur. "Tired," the man admitted, "but happy." "I'll need to run some tests," Julian said. "Assess heart function, see if there's permanent damage, plan rehabilitation. It's going to be a long process." "Doesn't scare me." "Time," Mr. Arthur said. "Just don't separate me from them." "I won't," Julian promised, and it was a promise he knew he'd keep. "The cats stay. Dr. Blackwood is already developing protocols. They'll be able to visit daily, under supervision. And when you're discharged, you'll go home with all of them." Mr. Arthur closed his eyes, relieved. Tiara settled on his chest, purring, and for a moment it was possible to see on the face of that elderly, frail man a deep peace. Julian began the tests. Electrocardiogram, cardiac ultrasound, function tests, and the more he investigated, the more amazed he became. There was damage, yes. The heart attack had left marks. But the recovery was happening much faster than any medical model could predict. "This is going to end up in scientific papers," Julian murmured to himself as he analyzed the results on the computer. "We've already started," Eleanor said, appearing beside him. "Caleb is helping with the documentation. We're recording everything. Times the cats are present, changes in vital signs, patient behavior, everything. We'll need more cases," Julian thought out loud. "To prove it's not just a coincidence, replicability is crucial." "I've already thought about that," Eleanor said. "There are other patients in this hospital who could benefit. Mrs. Gladys in room 412, for example. She's been here for weeks after a stroke. Depressed, not responding to stimuli. She has cats at home and keeps asking for them." "We can try," Julian said, feeling a growing excitement. "With Dr. Blackwood's protocol, with family approval, with strict supervision, we can really do this right." The afternoon turned into evening. Julian should have left hours ago. His shift was over, but he couldn't make himself go. There was something magnetic about that situation, about that improbable convergence of people and animals, science and compassion. Sarah ordered food. Nobody wanted to leave that room. It was as if by leaving the spell would break, as if the cold, protocol-driven reality of the hospital would invade and destroy that small pocket of humanity they had created. "You all need to sleep," Mr. Arthur said at dinner time, his voice already stronger. "All of you are exhausted." "I'm staying," Sarah said immediately. "I'm not leaving you alone again." "Me too," Eleanor added. "I have some shifts saved up. I can stay the whole night." "And I have a shift," Caleb said, "so I'll be in the hospital anyway. I can drop by every hour." Julian began, then stopped. He had no reason to stay. It wasn't his shift. Mr. Arthur was stable. There were enough people taking care of him. But even so, the idea of going home, to his empty apartment, to his empty problems, was unbearable. "I can stay a little longer," he concluded, "just to make sure everything's all right." Eleanor smiled, and it was a smile that said she knew exactly what was happening, that she saw Julian transforming before her eyes, shedding the arrogant doctor and becoming the doctor he always should have been. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing, the night brought a quietness to the hospital. The hallways, so full during the day, fell silent. The lights were dimmed. And in room 304, a strange but beautiful vigil continued. Julian ended up falling asleep in the uncomfortable chair in the corner. When he woke up, it was already the early hours of the morning. The first thing he saw was Sarah still awake, petting Cheddar, who had settled in her lap. Mr. Arthur slept deeply, his breathing steady, the monitors humming their constant song of normalcy. The other cats were scattered across the bed, some sleeping, others just watching with those mysterious feline eyes. "Couldn't sleep?" Julian asked Sarah softly. She turned, her eyes red but alert. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared of falling asleep and waking up and all of this being a dream, that he won't be here anymore, that I've lost my chance to fix things." "It wasn't a dream," Julian assured her. "And you haven't lost your chance. You're here now. That's what matters." Sarah wiped away a tear that insisted on falling. "I wasted so much time," she said. "So much time with anger, with pride, with resentment, thinking he owed me something, that it had to be my way. And I almost lost him. I almost lost the chance to say that I understand now, that I see he was dealing with his pain the best way he could." "He knows," Julian said. "I bet he always knew you loved him, even when you couldn't show it." "I hope so," Sarah whispered. "Because I don't know what I'd do if I couldn't say it anymore." Cheddar meowed softly, as if offering comfort. Sarah hugged him against her chest, burying her face in his orange fur. "You know what's funny?" she said after a while. "I was always jealous of these cats, of the time my dad spent with them, the way he talked about them. I wanted to be loved like that, with so much dedication, so much sacrifice." "But you were," Julian pointed out. "He just didn't know how to show it in a way you could receive it. People are complicated. We love in imperfect ways. His cats, they were simple. They needed him in straightforward ways. With you, it was more complex, scarier, easier to mess up." Sarah looked at her sleeping father. "He was afraid of losing me," she realized. "So, he pulled away before I could leave." "Probably," Julian agreed. "And you were afraid of being abandoned, just like when your mother left. So you pulled away before he could leave too." "We're a mess, aren't we?" Sarah laughed without humor. "Two people who love each other, drifting apart because they're scared of losing one another. What a stupid irony." "Not anymore," Julian said firmly. "You've got a second chance. Use it well." Sarah nodded, determined. Then she looked at Julian with curiosity. "What about you? Is there someone waiting for you at home, family, a partner?" Julian hesitated. It was a simple question, but the answer was complicated. "No," he finally admitted. "There was a fiancée. We broke up 2 years ago. She said I was married to my job, that I was never really there even when I was present, and she was right. Since then, it's just been me. Just work. Just emptiness." "Emptiness," Sarah repeated. "I know that feeling well." They sat in silence for a while, sharing that early morning stillness where truths can be spoken, because daylight hasn't arrived yet to judge them. "My mother called me before I came here," Sarah said suddenly. "Not my real mother, she's not here anymore, my stepmother. The woman my father never had the courage to get to know because he felt guilty about moving on. She saw the news about him being hospitalized, asked if I needed anything." "Your father remarried?" Julian asked, surprised. "No," Sarah said. "Never. But there was this lady, Mrs. Beatrice, who lived in his building, a widow too. They had coffee together every Sunday. She liked him, and he liked her. I could see it. But he never took the next step. He thought it would betray my mother's memory." "And you? What did you think?" "At first I hated the idea," Sarah admitted. How could he move on? How could he even consider someone else? But later, as I got older, I started to think my mother would want him to be happy. She'd want him to live, not just exist. "Did you tell him that?" "No," Sarah replied bitterly. "Because by the time I understood that, we weren't talking anymore. And now, I don't even know if Mrs. Beatrice is still interested. So much time has passed." "Maybe you should find out," Julian suggested, "when your father's a little stronger. Maybe you should give him the permission he's been waiting for all along. Sarah considered this, stroking Cheddar thoughtfully. Maybe, she agreed, if I get the chance, if he recovers enough to have a life again, not just survive. He will, Julian said, and this time it wasn't the doctor speaking. It was the man who had seen something unexplainable happen. He still has so much to live for. 7 furry reasons. A daughter who came back. And who knows, a future he hasn't let himself imagine until now. Dawn came slowly, painting the sky pink and orange. The cat started moving, stretching, yawning. Mr. Arthur gradually woke up, his eyes opening to find his daughter still there, Cheddar in her lap, the room bathed in soft light. "Sarah," he said, and there was so much emotion in that name that Julian had to look away. "I'm here, Dad," she replied. "I'm here and I'm not leaving." "You need to work. Your life." "I took leave," she interrupted. 2 weeks. I'm going to stay here, take care of you, get to know your cats, make up for lost time if you want, of course." "I want," Mr. Arthur whispered. "More than anything." Eleanor walked into the room with fresh coffee and rolls. "Did someone order breakfast?" she announced cheerfully. "And before you ask, yes, I brought special food for the fur babies too. They can't say I forgot anyone." Zeus was the first to react to the smell of the food, meowing loudly and jumping off the bed. The others followed him, and suddenly the room turned into an adorable chaos of cats rubbing against Eleanor's legs, meowing, purring, demanding their share of breakfast. "They're worse than children," Sarah laughed, and it was the first genuine laugh Julian had heard from her. "But much fluffier," Eleanor replied, starting to distribute kibble into the small bowls she had brought. Julian watched everything with a strange feeling in his chest. This was chaos. This was disorder. It violated at least a dozen hospital protocols. But it was also life. Real life. Messy, imperfect, yet authentic. Dr. Blackwood appeared at the door, stopped, observed the scene of 7 cats eating, a head nurse serving coffee, a daughter laughing with her father, and a doctor sitting in the corner with a goofy smile on his face. "You've all lost your minds," she declared, but there was no anger in her voice, just an amused resignation. "The director wants to see me at 9 to discuss the protocols. I hope you have your arguments ready." "We do," Diane said, appearing behind her with more documents. "Good morning, Dr. Blackwood. Ready to make medical history?" Dr. Blackwood sighed. "How much coffee do you have?" she asked. "Because we're going to need a lot." The day unfolded in a mix of hospital routine and extraordinary situations. Doctors from other departments started showing up, curious. Medical students wanted to see the case. Even local veterinarians called offering help. Caleb was coordinating the documentation, creating a detailed database of every interaction between the cats and Mr. Arthur. Temperature, heart rate, blood pressure, all correlated with the presence or absence of the animals, with which cat was doing what for how long. "This is going to be my thesis," Caleb said, excited. "If you let me, I want to do my research on this, on the measurable effects of animal-assisted therapy in cardiac patients. You have my blessing," Mr. Arthur said, his voice growing stronger with each passing hour. "If my boys can help science, let them help." "We'll need formal consent," Julian reminded. "Authorization forms, ethics committee approval. But if we do this right, it could change hospital practices, not just here but everywhere." "No pressure," Sarah joked. "Actually, there is pressure," Diane said, walking in with a tablet. 3 journalists have already called me. Someone leaked the story. Not the names, not the details, but they leaked that something unusual is happening at Mercy Heights Medical Center involving animals and a patient having a miraculous recovery. "Damn," Julian said. "Language," Eleanor scolded automatically. "Sorry, but damn," Julian repeated. "If the media gets here, it'll be a circus. They'll want photos, interviews. They'll turn this into a spectacle." "Leave it to me," Diane said, confident. "I'll issue an official statement. Vague, professional, promising more information when we have concrete data. I'll satisfy their curiosity without giving them ammunition for sensationalism. Trust me, I've done this for decades." "And if it doesn't work?" Sarah asked. "Then we improvise," Diane replied. "But for now, let's focus on what matters: Arthur's recovery, the cat's well-being, and doing this in a way that can truly help other people in the future." Mr. Arthur was sitting up in bed now, propped up by pillows. The transformation in just 24 hours was astonishing. Julian had seen rapid recoveries before, but nothing like this. And the more he thought about it, the more he believed there was something here. Not magic, not a miracle, but something at the intersection of biology, psychology, and the inexplicable power of genuine connections. In the afternoon, something unexpected happened. A woman in her early 60s appeared at the door of the room, hesitant, holding a bouquet of flowers. "Sorry, I don't know if I should be here," she said quietly. Mr. Arthur saw her and his face completely transformed. "Beatrice?" he said, incredulous. "Hi, Arthur," the woman replied, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Sarah called me. She said you were here. I hope you don't mind that I came." "You called?" Mr. Arthur looked at his daughter, surprised. Sarah smiled. "I did," she confirmed, "because you deserve to have all the people who care about you nearby. And Mrs. Beatrice cares, even if you're too stubborn to see it." Mrs. Beatrice entered the room slowly, as if she didn't want to invade a space that wasn't hers. She stopped when she saw the cats. "Oh," she exclaimed, delighted. "Are these them? The famous 7? Arthur? They're beautiful." "They are," he replied, and there was a paternal pride in his voice that made everyone smile. Mrs. Beatrice approached the bed and placed the flowers on the nightstand. Then, with a courage that seemed to have cost her dearly to muster, she took Mr. Arthur's hand. "I was so worried," she said, "when I found out you had been admitted, that you were in serious condition. I thought I might have lost the chance to say so many things I should have said before." "Beatrice," Mr. Arthur began, but she shook her head. "Let me speak," she asked, "because if I don't speak now, I might never have the courage again. Arthur, I know you loved your wife very much. I know Martha was the love of your life, and I never ever would try to replace what you had. But I like you. I like having coffee with you on Sundays. I like when you tell me stories about the cats. I like how you always save the last cookie for me, and I would like if you'd let me to be more present in your life. Not as a replacement for anything, but as someone new, someone who cares about you very much." The silence that followed was thick with emotion. Mr. Arthur looked at Mrs. Beatrice, then at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "Martha," he began, his voice choked, "was the most generous person I ever knew, and she would have hated knowing that I stayed alone for so long after she was gone. She made me promise, she made me promise that I would keep living, that I wouldn't shut myself off. But I couldn't keep that promise. Not until the cats showed up. Not until you showed up, Beatrice, with your Sunday coffees and your patience with my boring stories." "Your stories aren't boring," Mrs. Beatrice protested. "They are," he insisted, but he was smiling. "But you listen to them anyway. And I would very much like to have you more present in my life too, if you have the patience for a stubborn old man and his 7 cats." "I have all the patience in the world," Mrs. Beatrice said, and then she leaned in and kissed his forehead. A gesture so simple but so full of promise that Julian had to wipe his own eyes. Sarah was crying openly now, but they were happy tears. Eleanor had her hand on her chest, moved. Even Diane, who had seen it all in her long career, seemed emotional. Cheddar chose that moment to jump into Mrs. Beatrice's lap and start purring. She laughed, surprised and delighted, stroking the orange cat. "I guess I've been approved," she joked. "Cheddar has good taste," Mr. Arthur said. "If he liked you, it's because you're special." Julian slipped quietly out of the room, leaving that moment to the family that was reconfiguring itself. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall and just breathed. In 48 hours, his life had been turned upside down. Everything he thought was important had been questioned, and everything he had ignored had proven essential. Striking, isn't it? Dr. Blackwood was there, also watching from a distance. Seeing what really matters when we strip away all the layers of protocol and bureaucracy. "Yes," Julian agreed. "I'm starting to question everything I thought I knew about medicine." "Welcome to the club," she said. You know, I went into medicine 35 years ago, full of ideals, wanting to change the world, save lives, and little by little, it just became work, checklists, protocols. I followed the rules for so long that I forgot why they existed. I forgot their guides, not shackles. What changed? Julian asked. That, she gestured toward room 304. Seeing that sometimes the most medical thing you can do is the least conventional, and having the courage to admit that maybe, just maybe, we don't know everything, that there are still mysteries. And that's beautiful, not scary. They stood there for a while, two doctors at different stages of their careers, united by the same epiphany. The following days brought a strange but functional routine. The cats had set schedules, morning from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., afternoon from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., evening from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Outside those hours, Sarah took them home where she had turned the entire apartment into a feline playground. Mrs. Beatrice became a constant presence, bringing homemade food, talking with Mr. Arthur, reading to him, just being there. Sarah and she quickly developed a bond, discovering they had a lot in common. Caleb moved forward with his research, compiling impressive data. Mr. Arthur's vital signs consistently improved during the cat's visits. His response to medication was more effective. His mood was notably better. It wasn't a placebo, the numbers didn't lie. And then they started testing with other patients. Mrs. Gladys, the stroke patient Eleanor had mentioned, was the first. Her own cats were brought in with all the necessary protocol and supervision. The results were immediate. She cried upon seeing them, spoke for the first time in weeks, her eyes gaining a light that had gone out since the stroke. A terminally ill elderly man, Mr. Harold, asked to see his dog. The rules were adapted. Not just cats, any companion animal. The dog spent an afternoon with him, and for the first time in months Mr. Harold smiled, asked for food, showed an interest in living. "We're seeing patterns," Caleb explained in a meeting with the medical team. "Reduced stress, improved mood, greater treatment adherence, even a stronger immune response. It's measurable. It's real. It's science." "It's revolutionary," Dr. Blackwood added. "And it's stupid that it took us so long to take this seriously." The press remained interested, but Diane managed to keep details private while feeding enough information to maintain a positive narrative. "Pioneering Hospital in Assisted Therapy" was the headline. "Medicine of the Future Embraces Compassion" was another. Mr. Arthur improved every day. He started physical therapy, relearning to walk longer distances, strengthening a body that had been severely tested. And always with at least one cat nearby. Julian found himself changing too. He began talking more with his patients, not just checking symptoms, but asking about their lives, their families, their pets. He discovered fascinating stories. An 80-year-old woman who had a parrot that imitated opera, a young man with leukemia who raised tropical fish, a middle-aged woman with multiple sclerosis who had 3 dwarf rabbits, and he started asking, "How can I bring your little ones to visit you?" And then he made it happen. The apartment he wanted to buy, forgotten. The realtor eventually stopped calling, and Julian realized he didn't miss it. What was material success compared to what he was building there? A medical practice that truly mattered, connections that were genuine, a purpose that went beyond numbers in a bank account. 3 weeks after that surreal morning when he found 7 cats in a hospital room, Mr. Arthur was discharged. He was weaker than before the heart attack, would need follow-up care for months, but he was alive, conscious, and surrounded by love. Sarah had taken indefinite leave from work. She discovered she could do a lot of things remotely, and what she couldn't, she decided wasn't so important after all. Her father, whom she almost lost, was the priority now. Mrs. Beatrice moved into the apartment next to Mr. Arthur's. "To be closer, to help with the cats," she explained. Everyone knew it was more than that, but no one pushed it. They were adults allowing themselves a second chance at love, and that deserved respect and time. The day of discharge was a celebration. The entire staff was there. Eleanor, who had become almost family. Caleb, who had turned a 20-year emotional debt into a promising research career. Dr. Blackwood, who surprised everyone by hugging Mr. Arthur and whispering, "Thank you for reminding me why I do this." Diane, always efficient, making sure all the paperwork was perfect. And Julian, who had discovered that being a doctor was much more than diagnosing and prescribing. "I'm going to miss you all," Mr. Arthur said, his voice strong now, almost back to what it was before. "This strange place where cats can be doctors and doctors can be human." "You won't need to miss us," Julian replied, "because I'll be doing personal follow-up, home visits. I want to see how the boys are doing too. And I'll be here constantly to monitor the program," Caleb added. "Your case is the foundation of the entire research. I need long-term follow-up." "You just want to see my cats," Mr. Arthur accused, but he was smiling. "Guilty," Julian admitted, and everyone laughed. Sarah brought the cats in special carriers. 7 insistent meows echoed down the hallway as she carried them one by one. Other patients peeked out of their doors, waving, wishing them luck. "You're celebrities," a young nurse joked. "They're heroes," Eleanor corrected. "Every single one of them." In the parking lot, Sarah had rented a spacious van. It had 8 seats and plenty of room for the cat carriers. Mr. Arthur was settled in comfortably with adapted seat belts and support pillows. Mrs. Beatrice sat next to him, holding his hand. "Ready to go home?" Sarah asked from the driver's seat. "More than ready," Mr. Arthur replied, but before they could leave, Julian tapped on the window. "You forgot this," he said, handing over an envelope. "What is it?" Mr. Arthur asked. "Open it when you get home," Julian requested. It's something I wrote. For you." Mr. Arthur held the envelope carefully, as if it were something precious. He nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Thank you," he said, "for everything. For seeing beyond the protocols, for risking your career, for caring." "Thank you," Julian replied. "You. For reminding me why I became a doctor, for showing me that healing isn't just about the body, it's about the whole person, and sometimes about the whole person's cats too." They said their goodbyes. The van drove off, taking Mr. Arthur, Sarah, Mrs. Beatrice, and 7 cats home. Julian stood in the parking lot, watching until the vehicle disappeared around the bend. "Do you think he'll be okay?" Eleanor asked, appearing beside him. "He will," Julian said, confident. "He has many reasons to be okay, and for the first time in a long time, so do I." That night in his apartment, Mr. Arthur opened the envelope Julian had given him. Inside, there was a handwritten letter. "Dear Mr. Arthur, when I was 15 years old, my mother got sick. The doctors who treated her were cold, distant, efficient, but inhumane. She suffered not only from the illness, but from the loneliness of being treated as a case, not as a person. When she passed, I swore it would be different, that when I became a doctor, I would treat people with compassion, with time, with humanity. But life has a way of pulling us off course. Little by little, I became exactly what I hated. Efficient, cold, more worried about protocols than people. I stopped seeing patients and started seeing only diseases that needed to be cured. Until your 7 cats. Until I saw Sarah talking to you while you were unconscious. Until I saw Caleb thanking you for a kindness from decades ago. Until I saw Mrs. Beatrice looking at you with a love she refused to feel for fear of betraying a memory. You saved me, Mr. Arthur. As surely as your cats saved you, you saved me. You showed me that medicine is about connections, not just corrections, about being present, not just efficient, about loving what you do because you love the people you're helping. I don't know if there's life after the existence my mother had, but I know there's life after the kind of existence I was living. And it's a life worth living. Your cats are lucky to have you, and I am lucky to have met you. With deep gratitude, Dr. Julian Sterling. P.S. Zeus asked me to tell you that you should give more treats. But I think that's between the two of you. Mr. Arthur read the letter 3 times, tears streaming freely. Sarah, who had read over his shoulder, was also crying. "Dad," she said, "you changed his life. Without even trying." "It wasn't me," Mr. Arthur said, looking at the 7 cats who had already spread out across the apartment, exploring, marking territory, coming home. "It was them. It was always them." Cheddar jumped onto his lap, purring loudly. Tiara rubbed against his legs. Zeus settled at his feet. Casper climbed onto the back of the sofa behind him, and the other three, Sunny, Daisy, and Midnight, who had been quieter throughout the entire ordeal, began racing around the living room in chaotic celebration. Mrs. Beatrice started making tea. Sarah took pictures of the cats, already planning to make an album. And Mr. Arthur, surrounded by everything he loved, by everything he had almost lost, allowed himself simply to exist in that perfect moment. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Life found a new rhythm. Mr. Arthur did physical therapy 3 times a week. Sarah decided to change jobs, finding a position that allowed for more flexibility, more time with family. Mrs. Beatrice and Mr. Arthur officially started dating, causing delighted gossip among the neighbors. The cats continued being cats. Cheddar stole food whenever he could. Tiara maintained her independence, but accepted affection on her own terms. Zeus became the unofficial protector of the apartment. Casper slept 20 hours a day. Sunny, Daisy, and Midnight caused chaos whenever possible, but a lovable chaos. At the hospital, the assisted therapy program expanded. More patients, more animals, more families, reconnecting through the unconditional love of their furry companions. Julian led the project alongside Caleb, who was writing not just a dissertation, but an entire book on the subject. Dr. Blackwood became a fierce advocate for the program, arguing with administration, fighting for resources, ensuring the protocols were followed, but didn't stifle the spirit of the initiative. Eleanor was promoted to General Nursing Coordinator, a position that gave her the power to implement changes throughout the entire hospital. First change? Compassionate care training for the entire staff. Diane, ever the lawyer, ensured everything was documented, protected, legally sound. And when other hospitals began showing interest, she was there, negotiating terms, protecting the original vision. 6 months after that surreal morning, there was a meeting. All together again. Mr. Arthur, Sarah, Mrs. Beatrice, Julian, Caleb, Eleanor, Dr. Blackwood, Diane, and 7 cats, of course, because wherever Mr. Arthur went, they went. They were in a conference room at the hospital, but it didn't feel like a formal meeting. It felt like a family reunion. "We have the numbers," Caleb announced, projecting graphs onto a screen. 4 dozen patients took part in the program over these 6 months. Average reduction of 40% in hospital stay duration, a 65% improvement in depression scores, treatment adherence 80% higher, and we had not a single infection related to animal presence. "That's incredible," Sarah said. "This is going to change hospital policies," Dr. Blackwood added. "We've already received interest from 5 other hospitals that want to implement similar programs. 2 medical journals want to publish the data. There's even interest from a TV show to make a documentary." "No names, no faces," Mr. Arthur insisted. "You promised." "And we'll keep that promise," Diane assured. "Cases will be anonymized. You and your cats can stay in peace. The science will speak for itself." "There's more," Julian said, a special gleam in his eyes. "An anonymous donor just provided funds to create a specialized center, a space dedicated solely to animal-assisted therapy. It's going to be the first of its kind in the entire United States." "Who?" Eleanor asked, surprised. "Who donated that much?" Everyone looked at Diane, who just smiled mysteriously. "Let's just say there are people who recognize when something is worth investing in," she said, "and who prefer to remain anonymous, just like a certain retired veterinarian who chose to stay out of the spotlight." Mr. Arthur shook his head, but he was smiling. "You're all impossible," he declared. "And you love us for it," Sarah retorted. "I do," he admitted without hesitation. "I love all of you, for caring, for fighting, for making the impossible happen." Cheddar meowed loudly, as if giving his approval. The other cats purred in agreement. "So it's decided," Diane said. "The Arthur Harrison Wellness Institute will open in 3 months. Wait, what?" Mr. Arthur almost choked. "With my name." "With your name," Julian confirmed. "Because you're the reason all of this exists. And because it's time the world knew that the accusations against you were false, that you were always exactly what you seemed to be, a good man doing good things." "But I don't want—" "Dad," Sarah interrupted. "Please, Let them do this. Let your story be told the right way, so people will know. So no one can ever use lies against your reputation again. So your legacy can be what it always should have been. Love and healing. Mr. Arthur looked at every person in that room. People he'd met in impossible circumstances, who had become family, who had fought for him when he couldn't fight for himself. All right, he finally gave in. But only if the cats get their pictures too. They did half the work. Deal, everyone said in unison. The meeting dissolved into lively conversations, future plans, palpable excitement. Julian found himself sitting next to Mr. Arthur, both of them just watching the happy chaos around them. Are you happy? Julian asked. I'm complete, Mr. Arthur corrected. I have my daughter back, I have Beatrice, I have my cats, I have purpose again. What more could an old man want? Good health? Julian suggested. Your heart still needs care. My heart is being very well taken care of, Mr. Arthur said, looking at Sarah chatting animatedly with Mrs. Beatrice. For the first time in 8 years, my heart is full instead of empty. And that doctor is better medicine than anything you could prescribe. Julian couldn't argue, because he had seen firsthand what love could do. How could he heal wounds that medicine couldn't reach? How could he give reasons to live when logic said to give up? You taught me something, Julian said, something no teacher ever managed. That medicine is art as much as science. That healing the body without healing the spirit is only half the work. That sometimes the best treatment is simply being there, with compassion, with time, with love. It wasn't me who taught, Mr. Arthur said again. It was them. It was always them. And he was right, Julian realized. The cats, with their simplicity, with their straightforward needs, with their unconditional love, had been the true teachers. They had shown that connection is healing, that presence matters, that sometimes all someone needs is to know they're not alone. The opening of the center 3 months later was an emotional but quiet event. Only family, close friends, and the hospital staff. No big media, no spectacle. Just people who cared, celebrating something that mattered. Mr. Arthur cut the ribbon with Sarah on one side and Mrs. Beatrice on the other. The 7 cats were there, each in a decorated carrier, meowing their opinions about the whole event. The center was beautiful. Specially designed rooms where patients could spend time with animals without compromising safety or hygiene. A wing for dogs, another for cats, even one for smaller animals like rabbits and guinea pigs. Therapeutic gardens where recovering patients could be outdoors with their furry companions. It's perfect, Sarah said, tears of pride in her eyes. Dad, it's so perfect. It's a dream, Mr. Arthur agreed. A dream I didn't know I had until I lost it. And now it's here, real, helping people. The first patient to use the center was Mrs. Gladys, who had been one of the first cases after Mr. Arthur. She walked slowly, leaning on a walker, but she walked. And when she saw her cats waiting for her in one of the beautiful, welcoming rooms, her face lit up in a way that medicine could never achieve. Thank you, she said to Mr. Arthur, holding his hands, for having the courage to love these little ones, for showing us that love can heal, for making all of this possible. Don't thank me, Mr. Arthur said. Thank them, and Dr. Julian, who had the courage to let 7 intruders stay when any sensible doctor would have called security. I didn't have courage, Julian admitted. I was being blackmailed. Everyone laughed. Eleanor, who was there, shook her head. Call it what you want, she said. But it worked, and it changed everything. And it had changed. Not just the hospital, not just those specific people, but the way of thinking about medical care, about what truly healed, about what really mattered. The following years brought more changes. Sarah married a kind man who loved cats as much as she did. They had a daughter, Sophia, who grew up playing with her grandfather's 7 furry guardians. Mr. Arthur and Mrs. Beatrice got married in a small ceremony in the garden of the center that bore his name. The cats were unofficial bridesmaids, causing adorable chaos during the photos. Caleb finished his dissertation, which became a book, which became a series of lectures, which became an entire career dedicated to studying the intersection between companion animals and medicine. He became an international reference on the subject. Dr. Blackwood eventually retired, but only after ensuring the program was so established that no one could dismantle it. She began consulting for other hospitals that wanted to implement similar programs. Eleanor continued to be the heart of the hospital, the person everyone sought when they needed wisdom, compassion, or simply a hug. She trained a new generation of nurses, teaching that caring is as much about the heart as it is about technical competence. Diane kept practicing law even after retirement, championing causes related to animals and compassionate care. She won several cases that established important legal precedents for animal visitation rights in medical settings. And Julian became the doctor he always wanted to be. Not perfect, not a saint, but human. Someone who saw people, not just patients, who gave time, not just prescribed medication, who understood that healing was about so much more than closing physical wounds. 10 years after that impossible morning, when he found 7 cats in a hospital room, Julian was once again in room 304. A new patient was there, a 75-year-old woman who had just woken up from a critical condition. She had been unconscious for days after a severe stroke, and on her bed, purring softly, was a small golden-furred dog, her own dog brought by her daughter, authorized by the now established protocols. "Doctor," the patient's daughter said, her eyes shining. She woke up when Lucky arrived. She just opened her eyes and called his name. Julian checked the monitors, ran the necessary tests, documented everything. But deep down, he wasn't surprised. He had seen it happen many times. Connection as medicine, love as healing. "She'll be fine," Julian assured the daughter. "She'll need rehabilitation, it'll take time. But she has reasons to get better. She has you, she has Lucky, she has love. And that, believe me, makes all the difference." That night, Julian visited Mr. Arthur. The retired veterinarian was now 83 years old. Slower, frailer, but still with that gentle light in his eyes. Of the original 7 cats, 4 were still alive. Cheddar, now with grey fur. Tiara, still as independent as ever. Zeus purring louder than ever. And Casper, sleeping 23 hours a day instead of 20. "How are you?" Julian asked. "Grateful," Mr. Arthur replied. "For every day, for every moment, for having a second chance to do the right things. For seeing my daughter happy. For knowing my granddaughter. For loving Beatrice all these wonderful years. For watching these boys live good lives." Cheddar was lying on his lap, as always, as if he knew his work wasn't done yet, that Mr. Arthur still needed him and always would. "You know you changed the world, right?" Julian said. "Assisted therapy centers are opening all over the country. Caleb's research is influencing global policies. You literally changed how hospitals think about care." "It wasn't me," Mr. Arthur said for the 1,000th time. "It was them." "It was you too," Julian insisted. "Because you had the courage to love when it was easier to close your heart. The courage to move forward when it would have been simpler to give up. The courage to forgive when it would have been justified to hold a grudge. You taught all of us that courage isn't about grand gestures, it's about small acts of kindness repeated every day." Mr. Arthur smiled, his eyes welling up. "I just fed some cats," he said. "You saved them," Julian corrected. "And by saving them, you saved yourself. And by saving yourself, you saved so many others, including me. Never forget that." They talked for hours, as they regularly did now, about medicine, about life, about what really mattered. And when Julian finally left, it was already late at night. On the way home, he stopped at an animal shelter. It was something he did monthly now, volunteer work he had started years ago inspired by Mr. Arthur. "Dr. Sterling," the coordinator greeted him. "Just the person I wanted to see. We have a tough case. An elderly female cat, rescued from a neglect situation. Very scared, won't let anyone touch her. But she needs urgent veterinary medical treatment. I thought maybe you could help find a family that could care for her temporarily." Julian peered through the cage bars. A grey cat, about 15 years old, was curled up in the corner, eyes wide with fear, her fur matted and dirty. And something inside him shifted, a memory, a debt, a chance to give back everything he had received. "I'll take her," he said. You? The coordinator was surprised. But you always said you couldn't have pets because of work. I was wrong, Julian said. About a lot of things. Time to start making it right. He walked out of the shelter with the cat, who meowed in fright inside the carrier. In the car, he spoke to her softly, promising she was safe now, that she would be loved, that she would have all the time she needed to trust again. At home, he set up an entire room for her. Food, water, litter box, hiding spots. He left the carrier door open and stepped back, giving her space. It took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of patience, of slow movements, of gentle talk, of never forcing things. And then, on an ordinary night, as Julian sat on the floor reading a medical article, he felt something brush against his leg. He looked down. The cat was there, still hesitant, still scared, but choosing to trust, choosing to give a chance. Julian slowly reached out his hand. The cat sniffed, considered, and then rubbed against his fingers, and she began to purr. And Julian cried. He cried for everything he had lost, for everything he had found, for everything he had learned. He cried for the courage of that old cat who decided to trust again. He cried for the 73-year-old veterinarian who had fed stray cats and changed the world without realizing it. He cried for the arrogant doctor he had been and the compassionate man he was becoming. "You need a name," he said to the cat. "How about Faith?" The cat purred louder, as if in approval. And there, in that small room in a modest apartment in an American city, another little miracle was happening. Another life being saved. Another heart being healed. Because in the end, it was always about that. About connection. About compassion. About having the courage to love even when it hurts. About doing the right thing even when it's hard. About being human in the best way possible. Julian picked up his phone and sent a message to Mr. Arthur. "I just adopted a cat. Her name is Faith. I think you'd like her. Thank you for everything you taught me. Thank you for changing my life." The reply came minutes later. "Congratulations. She's lucky to have you, and you're lucky to have her. The love you give always comes back, in ways we never expect. Sleep well, my friend, and give Faith a pet for me." Julian smiled, put away his phone, and sat on the floor. Faith approached again, more confident now, and eventually curled up in his lap. And there they stayed, man and cat, two souls who had found refuge in each other. Because when it came down to it, that was the great lesson, that we're all searching for connection. Humans, animals, everyone. Searching to be seen, to be loved, to matter to someone. And when we find that, when we truly find it, we're capable of extraordinary things. Things like waking from a coma surrounded by 7 cats. Things like forgiving years of hurt in seconds. Things like risking careers to do what's right. Things like turning pain into purpose. The following months brought more transformations than Julian ever thought possible. Faith, the cat he had adopted, became an integral part of his life. She waited for him when he came home, slept at the foot of his bed, followed him around the house like a silent but constant shadow. And Julian discovered that having someone depending on him, someone who loved him without conditions or expectations, fundamentally changed how he saw the world. He started working fewer hours, not out of necessity but by choice, because now he had a reason to go home. He had Faith waiting for him, but more than that, he had a life beyond the hospital. He started cooking again, a hobby he had abandoned years ago. He began reading for pleasure, not just medical articles. He started taking walks in the park on Sunday mornings, watching families, couples, people living their ordinary yet precious lives. And he started dating, not seriously at first, but open to the possibility. It was something he hadn't done in years, since his engagement ended. But now, with Faith having taught him that his heart could still trust, he was willing to try. At the hospital, the therapy program grew in ways no one had anticipated. It wasn't just patients recovering from surgeries or acute conditions. There were psychiatric patients who benefited from the presence of trained animals. There were children undergoing cancer treatment who gained genuine smiles upon seeing therapy puppies. There were elderly people with dementia who recalled their lives while petting cats that resembled the ones they had owned decades ago. Caleb published his research in 3 of the most prestigious medical journals in the world. The citations multiplied. Invitations for international lectures arrived weekly, but he never forgot where it all began. Every lecture included the story of Mr. Arthur and his 7 cats, always preserving anonymity as promised, but honoring the legacy. One day, 2 years after that transformative morning, Julian received an unexpected call. It was from a reporter at a major international medical magazine. "Dr. Sterling," she said excitedly, "we're doing a feature on the 50 doctors who are changing medicine globally. You were nominated by multiple colleagues. We'd like to include you." Julian was speechless for a moment. Him? Changing medicine globally? It seemed absurd. "I think there's a mistake," he began. "I just implemented an assisted therapy program. Nothing revolutionary." "With all due respect, doctor," the reporter replied, "the numbers disagree. Your program reduced readmission rates by 35%, improved patient satisfaction scores by 70%, and influenced hospital policies in 15 countries. That's revolutionary. Can we schedule an interview?" Julian hesitated. Then he thought of Mr. Arthur, who always avoided the spotlight, but whose work had impacted so many. He thought about how visibility could help more people, more hospitals, more animals. "You can," he said, "but on one condition. The story isn't about me. It's about a man named Arthur Harrison and 7 cats who saved his life, and about how that taught us that medicine needs to be about more than just science. It needs to be about humanity." "Perfect," the reporter agreed. "That's exactly the story we want to tell." When Julian told Mr. Arthur about the feature, the old man just smiled. "They're finally going to tell your story right," he said, "the way it deserves to be told." "Our story," Julian corrected. "Without you, none of this would exist." The feature came out 3 months later. It was the cover story. "The Medicine of Compassion: How 7 Cats Changed Hospital Paradigms Globally." It had photos of the Arthur Harrison Wellness Institute, testimonials from patients whose lives had been transformed, impressive scientific data from Caleb, and interviews with Julian, Eleanor, and even Dr. Blackwood. But the most touching part was the special insert. Photos of the original 7 cats. Cheddar, majestic even in old age. Tiara, looking at the camera with that characteristic independence. Zeus still imposing. Casper captured sleeping, of course, and the other 3 who had already passed but whose archive photos showed the beauty and dignity that all rescued animals possess. And there was a photo of Mr. Arthur. A single photo taken in the garden of the institute that bore his name, surrounded not only by the cats, but by Sarah, Mrs. Beatrice, and his granddaughter Sophia. He was smiling, a smile that said everything about second chances, about forgiveness, about love. The caption read simply, "Arthur Harrison, retired veterinarian, saved 7 cats. They repaid him by saving him, and together they saved countless others." The article went viral, shared millions of times on social media, discussed on television shows, cited in medical lectures around the world. And suddenly Mr. Arthur, who had spent years as a forgotten veterinarian with a tarnished reputation, became an international symbol of resilience and compassion. But none of that changed who he was. He kept feeding stray cats in the neighborhood. He kept living modestly. He kept being just Arthur, the kind man who loved animals and who had learned, the hard way, that love always finds a way back. Sarah blossomed in those years. Her marriage was happy. Her daughter Sophia grew up curious and kind, and her relationship with her father had become one of the most precious things in her life. They talked every day, visited each other weekly, and never let unspoken words hang between them again. One afternoon, Sarah found an old box in her father's apartment. Inside were hundreds of letters, letters he had written but never sent, all addressed to her. "Dad," she said, tears already forming. "What is this?" Mr. Arthur, now 84 years old, looked at the box with a mix of shame and sadness. "They're letters," he admitted. "I wrote one every week since we fell out. Everything I wanted to say but didn't have the courage to say. All the apologies I didn't know how to express. All the stories about the cats I wanted to share. Everything. Everything a cowardly father couldn't say to the daughter he loved more than life itself. Sarah began to read, and she cried. She cried reading about how he woke up every morning thinking of calling but couldn't find the right words, about how he saw mothers and daughters in the park and felt his heart break, about how every cat he saved carried a piece of hope that maybe one day she could forgive him. "Dad," she said, hugging him tightly, "you were never a coward. You were in pain, you were lost, and you were trying the only way you knew how. I'm the one who should have seen. I'm the one who should have come back sooner." "You shouldn't have done anything," he insisted. "You were living your life. That's what I wanted. Even when it hurt, that's what I wanted." They cried together, daughter and father, releasing years of unspoken words, regrets and loves, poorly communicated, but always present. "Can I keep the letters?" Sarah asked. "They're yours," he said. They always were. Sarah took the letters home and spent weeks reading them, one each night before bed. And after reading each one, she wrote a reply. Not to send, because the conversations had already happened in other ways, but to process, to heal, to honor. And when she finished, she put his letters and her replies together in a book. A private book, just for the family, but one that told the true story of a father and a daughter who almost lost each other, but found their way back through 7 extraordinary cats. Sophia, now 7 years old, loved visiting her great-grandfather and the cats. Cheddar had become her favorite, and the old orange cat followed her everywhere during visits, as if he knew she was part of the family, a continuation of the legacy. "Grandpa Arthur," Sophia asked one day, sitting on his lap with Cheddar purring between them, "why do you love cats so much?" Mr. Arthur thought about the question, wanting to give an answer the little girl could understand. "Because they taught me something important," he said. "They taught me that no matter how far you've fallen, you can always get back up again. That no matter how much you've been hurt, you can still trust. That no matter how lonely you feel, there is always love waiting if you have the courage to accept it." "Are they your teachers?" Sophia asked. "They are," he confirmed. "The best I've ever had." Sophia considered this too serious for a child so young. "When I grow up," she announced, "I'm going to be a veterinarian, and I'm going to save cats too, like you." Mr. Arthur felt his heart overflow. A legacy, he realized, wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about planting seeds of kindness in young hearts and seeing what grew. "You'll be the best veterinarian in the world," he said. "After you," she corrected. "After me," he agreed, laughing. Mrs. Beatrice, now Mrs. Beatrice Harrison after the wedding, watched it all with a soft smile. She had brought joy back into Mr. Arthur's life in ways he thought were impossible. Not replacing Martha, never, but creating something new and equally precious. "Are you happy?" she would sometimes ask. "I'm complete," he always answered. "Because of you, because of Sarah, because of Sophia, because of these furry boys who saved me. I'm more than happy. I'm grateful for every second." And he was. Even when his body began to show signs of age, even when walks became harder, even when doctors talked about limitations and care, he was grateful, because he had loved and been loved. He had mattered. He had made a difference. At the hospital, a new generation of doctors was growing. Doctors who had learned from day one that compassion was not weakness, it was strength. That connection with patients was not a waste of time, it was an essential part of treatment. That protocols were guides, not shackles. Julian became the official residency mentor. His favorite lecture, the one he gave every year to new residents, was always the same. He told the story of an impossible morning when he found 7 cats in a hospital room, and how that morning changed not only his career but his entire life. Medicine, he would say to the wide eyes of young doctors, is not just about diagnosing and treating. It's about seeing people, seeing their pain, their hopes, their connections. Sometimes the best treatment isn't in a vial. It's in a conversation, a gentle touch, allowing a dog to visit, giving time even when time is short. Never forget that. Never become so efficient that you stop being human. And the residents listened, and they carried it forward. And little by little, medicine changed. Not all at once, not dramatically, but true change was rarely dramatic. It was gradual, steady, person by person, patient by patient. Eleanor eventually retired at 70. Her farewell party was a celebration of decades of dedication. But even in retirement, she returned to the hospital regularly as a volunteer, now working exclusively at the Arthur Harrison Wellness Institute, helping coordinate animal visits, training new volunteers, being the gentle but firm force she had always been. "Don't you get tired of the hospital?" Sarah asked on one of those visits. "It's not about the hospital," Eleanor explained. "It's about purpose. As long as I can make a difference, as long as I can help someone, I'll be here. Even if it's just holding the hand of someone scared or petting a nervous cat, if it makes a difference, it's worth it." Dr. Blackwood published a book on protocols for assisted therapy in hospital settings. It became required reading in medical schools. She donated all profits to animal shelters and assisted therapy programs around the country. "Who would have thought," she once remarked to Julian, "that my greatest contribution to medicine would be about something I initially wanted to ban?" "It's a sign of intelligence," Julian replied, "to change your mind when presented with new evidence." "It's a sign of humility," she corrected, "admitting we don't know everything, that there are still things to learn, that sometimes the patients are the teachers, not us." The years passed. Some of the original cats moved on, as is natural. Sunny was the first, at 17, sleeping peacefully in Mr. Arthur's lap. Then it was Daisy, then Midnight. Each departure was devastating, but also celebrated. They had lived long and loved lives. They had mattered. They had made a difference. And Mr. Arthur, with a broken heart but grateful, buried them in the garden of the centre that bore his name. Each one had a small headstone with their name and dates and a phrase, "Taught love when everyone needed to learn." Cheddar, Zeus, Tiara, and Casper remained. Elderly now, moving slowly, sleeping more, but still with that spark, that presence that said life was worth it until the last purr. When Mr. Arthur turned 85, the family organized a party at the centre. Not big, not flashy, just loved ones. Julian was there with Faith in a special carrier bag. Caleb brought his wife and their 2 children. Eleanor came with a homemade cake. Dr. Blackwood brought a photo album of all the patients who had benefited from the program over the years. Diane, now 78 but still sharp as a tack, brought champagne. Sarah, Mrs. Beatrice and Sophia prepared the garden with simple but beautiful decorations, and the 4 remaining cats had festive scarves tied around their necks, tolerating the indignity with the grace only cats can muster. "Speech!" someone shouted. Mr. Arthur stood up, leaning on a cane now but still steady. "I'm not good with words," he began. "I spent my life speaking more easily with animals than with people. But today, looking at all of you, I need to try." He paused, his eyes scanning every face. "When I lost my practice, my reputation, my purpose, I thought my life was over, that I had nothing left to offer. And then these cats showed up, one by one, needing help, offering love, and they saved me, gave me a reason to wake up, gave me purpose, showed me that I still mattered." Sarah was crying. Mrs. Beatrice held her hand. "And then I almost lost everything again," he continued. "I had a heart attack that should have been the end, but it wasn't, because my boys found me, and because extraordinary people," he looked at Eleanor, at Julian, "had the courage to break rules to do what was right. And because my daughter," his voice faltered, "my daughter came back and forgave me when I didn't deserve it." "You always deserved it," Sarah said through tears. "What I want to say," Mr. Arthur concluded, "is thank you. Thank you for every moment, for every kindness, for every second chance, for proving that it's never too late to start over, to reconnect, to love. You all taught me that, and I am forever grateful." There wasn't a dry eye. Even Julian, who thought he had become immune to emotion after years in medicine, was discreetly wiping tears. "Now, Mr. Arthur said, returning to his lighter manner, "let's eat this cake before the cats decide it's theirs." Everyone laughed, the emotional tension breaking. The party continued lightly, stories being shared, memories being made. Sophia played with the cats, her laughter filling the garden. Julian talked with Caleb about new studies. Eleanor and Dr. Blackwood reminisced about the old days. Diane debated recent legal cases with Mrs. Beatrice, who had discovered she had a sharp mind for justice. And Sarah sat next to her father, just the two of them enjoying that moment of peace. "Dad," she said softly. "Thank you." "For what?" he asked, surprised. "For not giving up," she replied. "After the fight, after everything, you could have given up, but you didn't. She kept living, kept loving, kept being you, and that gave me the chance to come back, to fix things, to have these years with you. So, thank you." "Sweetheart," Mr. Arthur said, holding her hand. "Do you think I could give up? When I had a beautiful daughter in the world? When I had these boys depending on me? When I still had so much love to give? Impossible." They sat there, father and daughter, as the sun set, painting the sky orange and pink, and the cats purred around them, and the family they chose, and because family isn't always blood, sometimes it's choice, celebrated another year of an extraordinary life. 6 months later, on a quiet autumn morning, Cheddar didn't wake up. Mr. Arthur found him still warm but motionless, having passed during his sleep. The old orange cat was 18 years old, a long and well-lived life. The grief was deep. Cheddar had been the first, the one who started it all, the one who had been with Mr. Arthur through the darkest moments and had helped him find light. The funeral, because yes, there was a funeral, was small but meaningful. In the garden of the Institute, under the tree where the other three already rested, Cheddar was buried with honors. Sarah read a poem. Sophia placed flowers. Mrs. Beatrice spoke about the unconditional love the cat represented, and Mr. Arthur just held the small box and whispered, "Thank you, my friend, for everything, for every purr, for every day, for saving me when I needed it most. Rest now, you deserve it." The months that followed were difficult. Mr. Arthur became quieter, more introspective. He still cared for the other three cats with devotion, but there was a sadness in him that hadn't been there before. "He'll be fine," Julian assured Sarah during one of her follow-up appointments. "He's grieving. It's normal. It's healthy even. It shows how much he loved." "I know," Sarah said. "I just wish I could take his pain away." "You can't," Julian replied gently. "And you shouldn't. Pain is the price we pay for love, and he would pay that price 1,000 times over for every moment he had with Cheddar. What you can do is be there, and you are, and that's more than enough." Gradually, Mr. Arthur returned to himself. Never quite the same. Losing a loved one always changes you, but functional, present, still able to smile and find joy. And then, one spring afternoon, something unexpected happened. Sarah arrived with a cardboard box. Inside, meowing loudly, was a little orange kitten. Not identical to Cheddar, but similar enough to make Mr. Arthur's heart tighten. "Dad," Sarah said, "I found him in a cardboard box in the rain, just like you found Cheddar so many years ago. He needs you, and I think you need him too." Mr. Arthur picked up the kitten with trembling hands. The small orange ball of fluff immediately started purring, snuggling against his chest. "He doesn't replace Cheddar," Sarah said quickly. "No one could, but he's a new story, a new chance to save, and I thought maybe you'd want to." "I do," Mr. Arthur said, tears streaming freely. "God, how I do." The kitten was named Pip, because he was small, of course, but also because sometimes new beginnings come in small packages, and Pip became the new light in Mr. Arthur's life, not erasing the memory of Cheddar, but creating new space for love. Julian visited regularly, always bringing Faith along. The cat who had been so scared in the early days was now confident and loving, and seeing her transformation, seeing how love had healed her wounds, constantly reminded Julian of the power of compassion. One day, almost 3 years after that initial morning, Julian was at the nurse's station when he received a call. It was from a hospital in Portugal. "Dr. Sterling," the voice said in English with a European accent. "I'm Dr. Henry Costa from St. John's Hospital in Porto. We read about your work. We're implementing a similar program here, but we're facing resistance. We'd like your help. Could you come give a lecture, maybe a workshop?" Julian had never traveled internationally for work. The idea was both exciting and terrifying. "I don't know if I'm the right person," he began. "You're exactly the right person," Dr. Costa insisted, "because you've lived it, because you transformed an entire hospital, because you truly believe in what you're doing. That's what we need here." True belief, Julian accepted. And 2 weeks later, he was on a plane to Portugal. It was his first time outside the United States, and he was nervous in ways that complex surgeries never made him. The lecture was in a large auditorium, packed with skeptical doctors. Julian stood at the front, looking out at that sea of faces, and thought of Mr. Arthur, of Cheddar, of 7 cats purring around a man who should have left but decided to come back. "Good morning," he began. "I'm going to tell you a story. About an impossible morning, 7 impossible cats, and a lesson that changed everything I thought I knew about medicine." And he told it. He told everything. The initial arrogance, Eleanor's blackmail, the purring cats, Mr. Arthur waking up, the transformation of everyone involved. He talked about data, yes, but more about humanity, about connection, about love. When he finished, the silence was absolute. Then one person started clapping, then another. And suddenly the entire auditorium was on its feet, applauding, many with tears in their eyes. "You'll face resistance," Julian said when the applause finally died down. "Everyone does, because this challenges how we've always done things, but I promise that if you try, if you really give it a chance, you'll see results that will leave you speechless, not just in the numbers but in the lives changed, including your own." The workshop in the following days was intense but productive. Doctors, nurses, administrators, all wanting to learn. Julian shared protocols, data, success stories, but more importantly, he shared the philosophy. That medicine without compassion is just mechanics, and humans aren't machines to be fixed, but people to be healed. When he returned to the United States, Julian was different, more confident, more certain that the work he was doing mattered not just locally, but globally. "How was it?" Mr. Arthur asked on his first visit after the trip. "Transformative," Julian admitted. "They want to implement everything. They're enthusiastic. And all because of you and your 7 cats. "Our 7 cats," Mr. Arthur corrected, "because now they belong to the world. Your legacy is no longer just mine. It's everyone they've touched." Julian realized he was right. What had started as an impossible situation in a hospital room had become a global movement. Hospitals in 23 countries now had animal-assisted therapy programs. Thousands of patients had benefited. Countless animals had found purpose by bringing healing. And all because an elderly man loved 7 cats. And they loved him back. The years continued their inevitable march. Mr. Arthur turned 87. Zeus and Tiara passed away months apart from each other, both having lived long and meaningful lives. Their absences left holes, but also legacies of love. Casper, true to his name, remained. The black kitten who always slept now spent even more time sleeping, but when he woke up, it was to rub against Mr. Arthur, purr loudly, remind him that he was still there. And Pip, now 4 years old, had grown into a magnificent orange cat, big and confident, the undisputed leader of the house. He protected Casper, played with Sophia when she visited, and was Mr. Arthur's constant shadow. "Do you think they know?" Mr. Arthur once asked Julian during a routine checkup. "The cats, do you think they know how much they mean? How much they've changed things?" Julian thought about the question carefully. "I think they know they're loved," he replied. "And in the end, isn't that what everyone wants, to be loved? To matter to someone? To make a difference, even a small one? They have that, thanks to you." "Thanks to all of us," Mr. Arthur said. "I saved them from the streets, but you saved their story. You turned it into something bigger, something that will last beyond me." "Don't say that," Sarah protested, always present at the appointments now. "It's true," Mr. Arthur said gently. I'm 87. I've had a long, good life, especially these last few years. They were the best of my life, you know? Because of you all, because of these kids, because I learned it's never too late to have the life you deserve. He paused, stroking Pip, who was on his lap. When my time comes, he continued, and Sarah started to protest, but he raised his hand. When it comes, I want you to know I'm at peace, that I lived fully, that I loved deeply, and that I have no regrets, none at all. Dad, Sarah said, tears already falling. Please don't talk like that. I need to, he insisted. Because I want you to know. I want you to be at peace too. I want you to celebrate when the time comes, not mourn for too long. To remember the happy stories, not the end. And to take care of Casper and Pip. They'll need you. Always, Sarah promised. We'll always take care of them. But the time hasn't come yet. Mr. Arthur kept going, surprising doctors with his resilience. He turned 88, then 89. Every birthday, everyone toasted not just to the age, but to a life well lived. Sophia, now 12, had in fact decided she would become a veterinarian. She spent all her free time at the centre, volunteering, learning, being mentored by the vets who worked there. Mr. Arthur watched her with pride that overflowed his chest. She'll be better than me one day, he'd say. Impossible, Sophia would always reply. You're the best. I'm just the first, he'd correct her. You'll be the next, and you'll be greater than I ever could have imagined. The Arthur Harrison Wellness Institute kept growing. A new wing was added. Then another. Programs expanded to include not just hospital visits, but therapy for veterans with PTSD, for children with autism, for the elderly with Alzheimer's. And every program succeeded. Measurable, documented, scientifically proven. Caleb's work had opened doors no one knew existed. Other universities now had entire graduate programs dedicated to animal-assisted therapy. Julian, at 45, was internationally recognized. He had turned down offers from bigger hospitals, more prestigious positions, much higher salaries. Because it wasn't about that. It was about being where he could make a difference. It was about honoring the legacy of 7 cats and an extraordinary man. One winter night when Mr. Arthur was 90, he woke Mrs. Beatrice at 3 in the morning. My love, he said softly, you need to call Sarah. Are you okay? Mrs. Beatrice asked, immediately alert. Are you in pain? No, he said. But I think the time has come, I feel it, and I want everyone here. Mrs. Beatrice didn't argue. After so many years with him, she trusted his instincts. She called Sarah, who called Julian, who called the others. And within an hour, everyone was there. Family, friends, all gathered. I'm not leaving just yet, Mr. Arthur said, seeing the worried faces. But I feel this might be my last chance to say some things. So let an old man talk. He was sitting up in bed, Casper on one side, Pip on the other. Sarah held one hand, Mrs. Beatrice the other. Sophia at the foot of the bed. Julian, Eleanor, Caleb, Dr. Blackwood, Diane, all gathered in a circle around him. When I was 73, he began, I thought my life was over, that I had nothing left to offer, that it was better to just exist until my time came. And then Cheddar showed up in a cardboard box in the rain, a little orange kitten no one wanted, and I saved him, or so I thought. But the truth is, he saved me, he and the other 6 that followed. His voice was strong, clear, stronger than it had been in months. They taught me it's never too late, that you can always make a difference, that love given comes back multiplied. And when I thought I had lost everything again, when my heart gave out and I should have passed on, they brought me back. Because love is the most powerful force there is. More than medicine, more than science. Love heals what seems impossible. Tears streamed down every face. Sarah, he looked at his daughter, you are my greatest pride. Forgiveness took years for me to say, but it's true. Watching you grow, become this strong and compassionate woman, fills me with indescribable joy. And Sophia, he smiled at his granddaughter, you're going to change the world, kid. I'm absolutely certain. Beatrice, he squeezed his wife's hand. Thank you for teaching me that a heart can love again, that second chances exist, that it's never too late to be happy. Julian, Eleanor, Caleb, all of you. His gaze swept the group. Thank you for believing, for taking risks, for turning an impossible moment into a movement that will last for generations. You honored my boys in ways I never thought possible. He paused, petting the two cats. And to you, he said to Casper and Pip, thank you for every purr, for every day, for proving that unconditional love exists, for being my teachers, my friends, my saviors. Dad, Sarah sobbed. You're not going? Not today, he assured her, but soon I can feel it. And I want you, when the time comes, to be at peace. Celebrate what was, don't mourn what's ended. Keep up the work, save more animals, help more people. And remember that love never ends, it only transforms. They stayed there until dawn, talking, laughing, crying, remembering, telling stories of the old days, making plans for the future. And when the sun rose, painting the room in gold, Mr. Arthur smiled. See, he said, another day, another blessing. And so it went, another day, another week, another month. Mr. Arthur carried on, living every moment fully, savoring every second. Until one autumn morning, peaceful and calm, he simply didn't wake up. Mrs. Beatrice found him with Casper and Pip lying on either side, like guardians. He was smiling. At peace. Complete. The grief was deep but not despairing, because he had made it clear he wanted celebration, not despair. He had lived 90 years and 3 months. He had loved deeply. He had made a difference. The funeral was held in the garden of the center. Hundreds of people showed up. Patients who had benefited from the program, hospital staff, people who had adopted animals through the informal network he had created, all wanting to pay their final respects to the man who had changed so many lives. Sarah read one of the poems he had written in one of those unsent letters. It was about hope, about new beginnings, about unconditional love. Sophia, 12 years old but looking older in that moment, spoke about what her great-grandfather had taught her, about kindness, about persistence, about never giving up on doing what's right. Julian spoke about transformation, about how 1 man and 7 cats had changed not just a hospital but medicine itself. And Eleanor, the last to speak, simply said, Arthur Harrison saved 7 stray cats. In doing so, he saved himself, and by saving himself, he saved all of us. He taught us that compassion is strength, not weakness, that love heals. It's never too late to start over, and now he rests, beside his first 7, reunited with those he saved, complete and at peace. Thank you, dear friend, for everything. Mr. Arthur was buried in the garden, under the big tree alongside Cheddar, Zeus, Tiara, and the others. His headstone simply read, Arthur Harrison, 1937-2027, loved cats, changed the world. The end. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're following us from. If this narrative touched your heart in any way, leave your sincere words in the comments. Do you believe Julian and Mr. Arthur made the right decisions by following their hearts? We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to hit like and, more importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories like this one.